Parshat Bereshit opens up the entire Torah. And while we often ask ourselves why the Torah chooses to open with the story of the creation of the world, and as Rashi famously asks, doesn't open with halachot, with laws regarding our life as Torah observant Jews, there's another question that has sort of constantly nagged at me over the years. And that's the question why the Torah decides to open up, perhaps not the first Parshat Bereshit, but the book of Bereshit, mostly with family dynamics. Why is it that we focus not only on family dynamics, but also on difficult family dynamics, complicated relationships between siblings, between parents and children? Why is it that that's how the Torah chooses to open the beginning of the Torah? The most moving discussion or address of this question I've ever found is in the opening section of Rabbi Sacks's commentary on the book of Genesis, on Bereshit. I'm just going to read a small excerpt of what he says there, but I really recommend checking out the introduction. He says the following: "Not by accident is Genesis a book about family. The family is where we learn emotional and spiritual intelligence. There is nothing simple or idealized about the families of Abraham and Sarah. Only much later in Tanakh do we discover that the family will turn out to contain the most compelling metaphors for the relationship between human beings and God himself. He is our father, we are his children. He is our husband, we are his betrothed. The tensions within the patriarchal family are symptomatic of Israel's later, larger battles with God, with humanity, and with itself." Rabbi Sacks continues in his introduction and essentially says the following: our first blueprint in the world is with family. We don't first have a relationship with God. We first have a relationship with humans. And later on, we'll discover that our most meaningful ways or prisms through which to discuss and think about our relationship with God is going to be through members of the family. And so by opening up the Torah with the concept of family, with the difficulties and troubled dynamics that can often beset the family, the Torah lets us know that our first spiritual blueprint is with the family itself. And if we have any hope of having a meaningful relationship with God, and he'll also say later in his introduction that first we have to find peace within the family before we can ever find peace with other nations. First, we have to focus on the smaller unit before we can ever branch out further. And so that's just one thought regarding this really massive question about why the Torah chooses to begin with family. Now, I want to look at Parshat Bereshit very briefly, because I think that already in the opening of the Torah, we have a very interesting exploration of family dynamics, although there it's in a couple's relationship. We have famously two different creations of Adam and Chava, in the first chapter of Bereshit and in the second chapter. In the first chapter of Bereshit, Adam and Chava are presented, I would say very simply, as equals. In the 27th pasuk, "Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzalmo, b'tzelem Elokim bara oto, zachar u'nekeva bara otam." God makes male and female together. There's no differentiation of who comes first or who comes second. And they're given the same mission in the world. "Vayivarech otam Elohim, vayomer lehem Elohim, peru rovu me'ul et haaretz, וכבשוה, ורדו בדגת הים, ובעוף השמיים, ובכל חיה הרומסת על הארץ." They have the exact same job in the world. They are to be at the top of the totem pole and to also care for the world that is beneath them. And there we have this image of male and female, of the couple, of this marital relationship as being one that is shared in a relatively equal way, where they share the same joint mission. Of course, in the second chapter of Sefer Bereshit, we have a very different description or evolution of the relationship between man and woman. We of course have man who's in the world first, discovers his need, his longing, his romantic longing for a partner after he realizes that none of the animals can be an appropriate partner for him. And then woman is created and she enters the world in a relationship. She comes into the world already within a function. It's an utterly different way to look at the relationship between man and woman. I don't want to get into the question of if one is subordinate or one is superior, but the fact is they come into this world already in the function of a relationship vis-a-vis each other. Whereas their first mission in the world is a universal mission to be them who rule the world, so to speak. In the second formulation or the second description of how man and woman function, their function is vis-a-vis each other. How will they then be able to nurture and be in a unit together? I think that this idea or this dichotomy also comes into play in perhaps what's sort of a famous machloket between Rashi and the Ramban about the phrase v'yu levasar echad, this idea that man and woman join together. Rashi says that the one flesh that they eventually become manifested in the children that they create, whereas the Ramban says v'yu levasar echad relates to their emotional connection between them, that they really long for each other in an intimate relationship. These two different perspectives relate to the ways we look at a relationship. Do we look at the nature of a marriage for the sake of procreation, or do we look at it for having its own intimate value as a relationship that nurtures? I think that when we look at these sort of two ways, whether both the two creations of man and woman or the two ways to look at the relationship itself, I think that it serves as a really, really useful prism to look at the way marital dynamics play out in the entire book of Bereshit. We will see avot and imahot who have better communication, who have a joint mission, that they're very clearly one unit. Abraham and Sarah certainly come to mind when I think of that. And then we have couples who undermine each other. And of course we see that in Adam and Chava themselves in chapter 3, and we see that to a certain degree with Rivka and Yitzchak. And what I think that the opening of the Torah says is that you, man and woman, have the ability to be partners in a joint mission in the world. On the other hand, you're also forever engaged in a dance, in an intimate relationship, that if you care for it and cultivate it, can remain a partnership. If you don't, and if you undermine each other, then it can become something that is far less evolved than that. And I think that when we think about the book of Bereshit as a book about families, and we open up specifically with the marital relationship, it provides us with a way to assess the rest of Sefer Bereshit with an eye that's sensitive to the way that couples treat each other, and ultimately the way that will manifest and influence the families that they themselves create.